Telltale's The Walking Dead is a series notorious for its mysteries and its hypotheticals, whether that's an obscure detail that makes no sense, a missing, or the seemingly impossible survival of a particular character. I think we all want an explanation on how exactly Kenny survived the alleyway at the end of Season 1 for instance. As one of my favourite games of all time, I have gathered a compilation of, in my opinion, the most interesting or unusual of these. Some have been widely discussed among the community for years, yet some are so obscure to the point where no one has ever mentioned them. As the oldest game in the series, and to keep this list chronologically precise, I will be primarily focusing on Season 1 for this video before potentially expanding on subsequent seasons in the future. If there's anything I missed or you felt should have been included, please let me know your personal favourites in the comments because I'd love to hear them. So with that out of the way, let's go on to mystery number 1.
Come on! Dad!
After discovering the true nature of the dairy farm in episode 2, Lee is knocked unconscious and awakes in their meat locker soon after. Overcome with rage, Larry has a fatal heart attack while trying to break the door down, and we're suddenly forced into a dilemma. Do we console Lily and give Larry CPR, or do we instead team up with Kenny and smash his face in? Understandably, Kenny fears for the safety of Clementine and is prioritising reaching his family above anything else. In the heat of the moment, he launches a salt lick off of his head to prevent him from turning. In his eyes, it was too dangerous to keep him alive and was immediately apologetic afterwards. Ultimately, this begs the question if Larry was still alive at this moment, and would he have survived the meat locker if Kenny hadn't intervened? This mystery has sparked massive debate and is the most prominent on this list, so we need to start from the very beginning and go through the evidence on both sides before giving my conclusion at the end. If, like me, you've both played Season 4 and naturally just hate Lily and by extension her dad, it's an easy choice to make. In this case, this mystery is nullified before it has even begun. Only when we choose to give Larry CPR can we notice a very important detail in support of Larry's survival. He opens his mouth to breathe right before he dies. This proves without any doubt that Larry was still alive at least, which isn't really a surprise. But would he have survived much longer without medicine or a doctor? Let's just start by saying that CPR isn't necessarily classified as a treatment, more so an emergency measure to keep blood pumping around the body, preferably by mimicking a heart-like rhythm until an ambulance arrives. Although Larry was visibly breathing, it was most likely laboured gasps as his body made a last-ditched effort to survive, and not a result of Lee's desperate attempt to resuscitate him. Many people, including myself, have compared his heart attack in the meat locker to that at the drugstore in episode 1. This one was much more dangerous than the first, but can be used as evidence against Larry's chance of survival, even with all the medicine in the world. As mentioned by Katja in episode 1, Larry needed nitroglycerin tablets. These are typically symptom relief medications for acute coronary syndrome or other related diseases, but are rarely administered for fatal heart attacks. Aspirin is also a preventative measure and wouldn't have helped much in this situation. The equipment that the St. John's had outside Mark's room were close by, sure, but it was specifically used for keeping their victims alive amid blood loss or serious injuries, things like morphine, saline, and IV tubes, none of which could have been used to help him. Evidently, the only way to save him was by performing emergency surgery. I can safely say that Larry would have never received this treatment, even if he somehow did manage to make out of the meat locker alive. On the other hand, even massive heart attacks vary in intensity and duration. Generally speaking, it's unlikely for the heart to stop completely within the first hour. According to the data that I found, I will conclude that Larry's chances of surviving this attack, accounting for his age, were around 3% in my opinion, but I could be wrong. And with that, I'll move on to some fan speculations. Someone correctly pointed out that Larry's mouth movement wasn't a positive sign. This could have just been agonal respiration, which is known to occur during cardiac arrest, ultimately delaying Larry's inevitable death momentarily until he received immediate help, which we already know wasn't coming. It's also theorized that Kenny's swift actions saved the lives of every person in that room because Larry was already dead at that moment, and like every other walker, the mouth movement was an early sign of reanimation. It's weird because Lily explicitly tells us that Larry has stopped breathing before we've even performed CPR.
Lee! Is he breathing at all?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, let me take over. Keep checking his pulse.
If this were a real life situation, I would side with Kenny and hold Lily back for this very reason. We know the speed of which someone can turn. Depending on your choices in the same episode, either David or Travis turn almost immediately after succumbing to blood loss. If this doesn't convince you, in episode 3 there's a secret death scene where you fail to convince Kenny that Doc is about to die. He throws you back outside, and when you go back to check on him, he's already killed Clementine. Very disturbing stuff. In conclusion, I always side with Kenny on this one, and it's not even close. Larry was probably alive, yet would have died very horribly had we not put him out of his misery. On top of that, he tried to kill us at the drugstore after we literally risked our lives to get him medicine, and is consistently just a horrible person, despite any attempt to treat him with respect throughout episodes 1 and 2.
Please! Someone!
While we were busy celebrating Larry's death for 5 minutes straight, another weird occurrence took place right next door. An unknown mystery coincides with this one that has left me scratching my head for many years. This is the real mystery of episode 2 in my opinion because of how ambiguous and uncanny it is. Once again, I will give an overview of events leading up to this point to present this mystery as clearly as possible before discussing it further. At the beginning of episode 2, we are introduced to a character called Mark, a new member of the group and friend of Lee's. After being ambushed by bandits at the dairy farm, the St. Johns deliberately turn on the electric fence to prevent us from leaving. It was a setup. Although Lee makes it out safely, Mark gets hit in the shoulder with an arrow before Brenda St. John takes him inside to treat it. Unfortunately, this is essentially the last time we ever see Mark alive because we're constantly shunned, ignored, or given weird excuses every time we ask to see him.
How's Mark doing in there?
Best patient I ever had. Oh, my boys get so much as a scratch and start hollering. He could definitely teach them a thing or two about being tough.
I'd still like to check on him.
You're gonna have to trust me on this, Lee. I've helped stitch my share of wounds. I know what I'm talking about. Everybody sit down, I'll go get the meal. Oh, this is a delight.
I could eat a horse.
Where's Mark?
Now don't you worry about him. I've already brought some food up. You just let him rest.
Our suspicions increase. The tension builds up until we discover their true intentions. Now for the weird part. After Lee confronts the St. Johns about what they did to Mark, he falls down the stairs in a last-ditched effort to save himself. He is minutes away from death at this point and cannot be kept alive for obvious reasons. Now, when we break out of the meat locker and make our way back to the house to save Katja, Mark is now back upstairs, not alive but as a walker. Needless to say, the amount of questions I have are enormous, so let's go over them. Firstly, Mark was in no condition to climb back up the stairs himself. We can automatically assume that the St. Johns dragged him back to the secret room after they knocked us out. But that doesn't explain how Mark was able to escape a second time, presumably while he was still alive because they'd shoot him otherwise. It would have also been reckless to leave a potential walker stranded in your home without locking a near-dead Mark in a room somewhere. But because of their idiotic decisions, Mark kills an unsuspecting Brenda near the top of the staircase in a poetic act of vengeance. I will say in their defense that Brenda was in an overtly panicked situation, thus her short-term memory would have been reduced significantly. Her younger, stronger sons were likely those who took Mark back, in the process failing to inform Brenda about where exactly they hid him. So we can rationalise how exactly Mark got back upstairs and that Brenda wasn't made aware of his presence. But we still don't know why on earth Andrew and Danny kept him around. Failed to lock him up even though they knew he was going to die very soon. Was there another reason behind this? A possible theory is that the St. Johns didn't yet know the full extent of the disease, specifically that everyone is infected and will turn quickly into walkers after death. I've mentioned Danny's partial knowledge regarding this fact, but at no point does he say, "you turn if you die." He says it passively when questioned about cannibalism. It's as if he doesn't have the first-hand experience of watching people turn like we have, for example. Thus, what happened to Mark was due to ignorance and nothing malicious. Of course, there's still the disturbing possibility that Mark's death was intentional. Both Andrew and Danny are honestly some of the creepiest people I've ever seen, and it's only elevated every time we interact with them. From Danny's weird one-liners,
"It'll be a good one,"
to Andrew's face in this one scene as he tries to kill us. It's horrific. Let me know your thoughts on this one because the longer I even think about what they could have had in store for us and Mark, the worse I feel.
Listen,
I'm not much for goodbyes. Tell the others for me?
Sure. You take care of yourself, Molly.
You too, Lee.
Taking a step back from the convoluted side of things, I want to talk more about the missing characters of Lee's group. People that have either left completely, or characters that are presumed dead but can be argued otherwise. Starting from as early as Clementine's house, these side characters are temporarily introduced to Lee and ourselves before leaving forever, and to this day we have absolutely no idea what happened to them. Chet and Sean are the first survivors that we find. We all know what happens to Sean, and to this day I still try and save him, even though it's impossible. Chet, on the other hand, is one of the most mysterious characters in the game. If we leave Clementine's house at night, Chet will already be dead, and we're introduced to someone completely different who I'll talk about later. Only when we leave in the morning can we talk to him alive. He says one sentence, jumps in the back of Sean's car on the way to Herschel's farm, awkwardly says goodbye and walks home to his mum's. That's the last time we ever see him, making him one of the few unknown sub-characters who may or may not have survived much longer.
Hey, Sean, I'm gonna run on home. My mama's gonna be in a snit.
No sweat, man. I'll catch you tomorrow night.
It was nice to meet you both.
Most people share the opinion that I have, and it's that Chet doesn't seem aware or smart enough to have even survived the walk home. We already know that he dies the very same night if we just wait at Clementine's house a little longer, so it's likely that he wouldn't have reached his mother's house, as cynical as it may sound. He also makes the reckless decision to walk home through the street at night. I would do exactly what he did and abandon the group to reach a family member, but I'd ask for a lift first, or maybe stay the night and walk home in the morning. Evidently, he didn't know the seriousness of the situation, and that's what does, or will, depending on your choice, cost him his life. If he did make it home, then it's anybody's guess. I will only say that his best chance to survive in the long term would have been to find another group. Andre Mitchell is a police officer and Chet's replacement if you decide to travel at night. Ironically, we know even less about him and his fate after dropping us off at the farm, but he is a very nice person overall and gives his condolences to Sean about his friend's passing, even refusing to shoot him back at Clementine's house. As an armed police officer with a car, he would have been better equipped to have survived in the short term, unlike Chet, and for that reason I'd like to believe that he's still alive. To my knowledge, he's the only sub-character in the series that can be avoided completely. I didn't even know that this guy existed until my 5th or 6th playthrough, and I love little details like that. I will talk briefly about Glenn because we all know what happened to him. He mentions a group in Atlanta at the end of episode 1 and leaves to help them. It's here where he allows Rick to escape the tank, so it was worth it. Especially knowing what happens to the Mortar Inn in subsequent episodes, he made a good decision. It's funny to think that because Lee saved Glenn, which led to Glenn saving Rick, Lee indirectly saved Rick's life. Molly is a fan favourite of the series, loved for her athleticism and for being the first to strategically diverge walkers effectively, on a large scale at least. She joins the group at the coast while Lee and Kenny search for non-existent boats. After a rocky start, we learn more about the city, more about the community that she was with previously until she was kicked out for concealing her sister's illness. She helps us retrieve items from said community, which has since collapsed entirely, in exchange for a spot on the boat we eventually find. Despite all of this, she unexpectedly leaves one night without telling anyone. Lee consoles her at the staircase and makes sure she's content with her decisions. They hug and say goodbye, and with that she's yet another entry on the small list of unknown characters. Here are the theories on what could have happened to her. Since she's extremely adept and resourceful due to being a scavenger for many months, we can say with confidence that she would have survived long after the events of Season 1. Especially after the fall of Crawford, she would have kept using the bells, and she would have found a way to fortify the walls if she needed to. Or she would have just infiltrated it at will whenever she needed food or water. The only danger of hers were other people. But Savannah is a city, and although I agree with Kenny over Lily no matter what the argument is, his decision to enter a city was a stupid one, and I doubt that any other group after the events of Season 1 would have made that same mistake. It's almost common knowledge, and in Kenny's defense he did have a really good reason to come here. He got extremely lucky, but it still wasn't enough. What I'm saying is, Molly would have been fine, and she would have been alone for many years until she left Savannah herself. Now for a more upsetting theory, and the worst part is, I believe this one to be true. Now, when Lee asked why she was leaving, her response was vague at best, giving little explanation for her sudden change of heart.
I just wanted to say thanks for everything. It's been fun.
Whilst speculating about why this is, why she went through with all of the effort, was previously adamant about coming with us, almost aggressive at times, I found only one possibility with the help of Reddit. She's already bitten. This likely occurred after she temporarily split up with Lee on the garage roof. She later rejoins us in the school and from this point forth doesn't mention anything regarding her willingness to stick around or leave Savannah. She's holding a picture of her sister and has some blood on her face. Once again, she tenaciously avoids the question, so we don't know why exactly she left with the battery. All we know is that she probably got bit while looking for her sister's photograph on the way back. I doubt that was her only reason, however. Back at the house, she initiates a hug and says some kind words before leaving forever. You can argue that she's just being nice in this scene, but it's suddenly more upsetting and fitting if we connect it with the bite theory. Pay attention to her face as she walks down the stairs and the expressions of her voice and tell me what you think.
Yeah, I've been thinking it over. It's not for me. Sounds like it'd be pretty crowded, and I never did like the water.
You sure about this?
I'm sure. I've always done better on my own anyhow.
Oh yeah, there's also the cancer survivor group that stole the boat. For all I care, I hope that Kenny hid a bomb in the engine and Lee died immediately after leaving. Imagine doing that to Clementine, leaving her all alone in a populated city so you can ride off into the sunset with her boat. Not even the biggest villains in the series would do something like this.
It was me.
Huh?
I was the one giving the bandits supplies.
What?
I think we've all asked ourselves why anyone in Lee's group thought it was a good idea to keep this detriment to life, the biggest liability in video game history, around at all. Especially after he indirectly caused the death of nearly everyone in episode 3 and beyond. This is more of a hypothetical rather than a mystery, but it's such an important topic that it deserves a thorough discussion anyway, and I would even expand on this and make a whole video about Ben in the future. First, I want to make up a scenario on the outcome of Lee's group, and by extension, the events of season 1 as a whole, if Ben didn't exist, or if he had died in the forest at the beginning of episode 2 before cursing the lives of everyone he ever came into contact with. I suppose we can start with the first of his indirect deaths, Larry. Even though this was mostly Kenny's fault, and Ben's information regarding walkers was correct, Kenny would have never done this to Larry without knowing this information.
Remember what Ben said. Gotta destroy the brain.
Essentially, Larry had a small chance to survive the heart attack and could have survived long after season 2 if Ben wasn't around. I do completely acknowledge that the St. John incident probably would have occurred anyway, but it's also entirely possible that if David didn't step in their modified bear trap, they wouldn't have followed the trail of blood back to the Mortar Inn disguised as unsuspecting friendlies just looking for food. The division between Lily and Kenny would have been alleviated immensely if this never happened. She wouldn't have snapped and killed Carly/Doug, and the altercation with the bandits would have never happened. So Duck and Katja would still be alive, everyone would have been peaceful at the Mortar Inn for the foreseeable future. Eventually, Kenny would have followed through on his plan to head towards the coast, but this time we would have had the option to join him and his family, or to remain in Macon with Lily, Carly and Clementine. Depending on the choice, Lee's story would have looked much different, with fewer people like Duck and Ben to worry about, who I don't care about in the slightest, let's be honest, and without the constant power struggles, the longevity of the group would have improved. In summary, Ben has the blood of nearly every dead character from season 1 on his hands because they literally all circle back to him. Larry, Carly, Doug, Duck, Katja, Chuck, and Bree, who I hate, so props to Ben on that one. He almost kills Clementine on several occasions, almost kills Molly, and maybe caused her to get bit, depending on if you agree with that theory and if it was in fact this particular walker who bit her instead. He kills himself and Kenny in the process. Theory number 5 coming up. And lastly, because he wouldn't listen to Lee's advice and keep an eye on Clementine, she gets kidnapped and Lee gets bit. What an idiot.
That fucking shitbird Ben.
So how did Kenny escape the alleyway in season 1? If we let Ben die at the clock tower, there's another path which is slightly different. In this one, Krista jumps into a dark room to pick up the radio after we drop it. Kenny then jumps down to save her before being swarmed by walkers. He then fires his last couple of bullets before going silent. I will primarily focus on the alleyway scenario for this mystery because the dark room is both spacious and easily traversable with doors and obstacles. Even after playing this path for the first time, I knew that Kenny would survive it, which is the opposite of how I felt in the Ben scenario. From examining the environment in this scene, there's nothing that immediately sticks out as a possible escape point that Kenny could have used to his advantage. The windows on the left are boarded up, and we would have heard Kenny break them if he decided to climb in. The windows on the right are dark, but they also look like they cannot be opened by hand. Again, I think the only way for Kenny to escape through these windows was if he broke them, and we hear nothing loud besides the last bullet he used on Ben. There's a theory that he pulled a Glen and somehow hid underneath Ben's body or a bin. I disagree with this entirely, as Ben's body was nailed into the floor, so Kenny couldn't have maneuvered beneath him in a way that could cover even 20% of his body. The bins are also way too small and full for him to use. It's also against Kenny's personality to hide, so for those reasons I believe the following theory to be correct. Let's pay close attention to both sides of the alleyway. The side closest to Ben is long, has about 50 walkers, and would have been impossible to break through. I admit to that 100%. As strategic as Kenny is, he knew about this and didn't look in that direction. We can see the other side in this shot here. Although there are still a lot of walkers, the main road is only about 10 meters away. This was his only chance to push through. Look at this next scene also. He shuts the gate on Lee and takes one more look at his window of opportunity, as to say, I'm about to do this. Now for the execution. There are 8 walkers on the side he needs to push through. First, he takes out 2 of them. Notice as he's about to shoot Ben, there's a gap right here. He then uses his last bullet on Ben to distract the walkers from the dangerous side, and it's at this point he belts it down the alleyway. Lee is now climbing the ladder, so we cannot see Kenny run past us, we only hear 3 thuds. These were the last walkers that were in Kenny's way before he made it to the main road and to safety. After Lee climbs the ladder, we see Krista looking down. Omid said earlier that he couldn't see anything from up here, and Krista confirms this by asking Lee to confirm if we saw them die. She couldn't see anything either. In Season 2, we're given some clarification on what happened following his escape. Sarita met him in a diner, and his beard was even longer than what it is in Season 2. He said that after Savannah, he was all over the place for a while before settling down at the lodge. Presumably, he and Sarita were already heading north in search of Wellington around this time. When asked about the alleyway, he only mentions being really lucky. But gathering these pieces of dialogue together, we can create a story of Kenny's events of Season 1.5. Before his death, Lee tells Krista and Omid to take custody of Clementine after he passes away. In the final scene, we see Clementine in the outskirts of Savannah where they meet up. But Lee also told Krista and Omid to find the train. I believe that Kenny made his way back to the train first, and this is what he meant by travelling all over after Savannah. Eventually the train broke down or ran out of fuel, so he sought refuge in another small town where he met Sarita. This is just a speculation of course, but it's really interesting to theorise about Kenny's life while he was off camera. Even after Season 2, there's still a chance that he lived after the Wellington ending if we split up with him. This is the only ending that leaves a question mark on his name and his possible return to the series. So that's all I have for this video. Tell me what mysteries or theories you have about Season 1. Tell me what you think happened to the 5 missing characters, if you think they're all alive or deceased. If you have any suggestions for future videos, please send them to my email listed on my about page. I may tackle individual mysteries for the sake of length if I ever decide to make more videos on The Walking Dead, because there's so much ambiguity in this series and that's why it's one of my favourites of all time.